originally stated that I was going to be figuring out why depression and suicide rates have increased since later years. To be honest, I didn't really know what later years meant. I was thinking maybe 1990s, 1980s, 1970s. Strangely enough, suicide rates have actually decreased since the 1980s. An article written by the New York Times in 1987, every 1.1 seconds at that time, a teenager tried to commit suicide. That's really scary, actually, when you think about it. Even worse, every 80 minutes, one of them succeeded. When you think about that, that's less than 2 periods. Less than 2 periods when somebody died. But just because suicide rates have decreased between 1987 and around 2000s, doesn't mean that suicide still doesn't go on, or even that it's actually decreasing now. I went online to a website called suicide.org, and I was surprised to find out that between 2003 and 2004, there has been a 76% increase from 10 to 14-year-olds committing suicide. And there's been a 9% increase from 15 to 19-year-olds. The overall youth suicide rate increased by 8%. I mean, it's the leading cause of death between people 10 and 20, surpassed only by car crashes and homicide. In 2004, there were 4,599 suicides in Americans 10 to 24, which is up from 4,232 in 2003. 161,000 youths between the ages of 10 to 24 were sent to the emergency room because of self-inflicted harm. And depression is the cause of over 2/3 of the 30,000 reported suicides in the U.S. every year. But while women are being told to express their feelings and tell others what they're thinking, teenage boys are less likely to seek help because people just don't tell them to tell others what their feelings are. 5.7% of adolescents that had a major depression episode in 2014 were male. And 17.3% of adolescents that had major depression episode were female. But that doesn't mean males still don't experience depression. Out of them, 5.7% were 12-year-olds, 8.7% were 13, 10.7% were 14-year-olds, 13% were 15-year-olds, 14.1% were 16-year-olds, and 15.1% were 17. After all, 90% of suicide victims suffer from depression, which makes a teenager 12 times more likely to attempt suicide. What is depression? Well, it's when you get sad for more than 2 weeks. Everybody gets sad at some point. Maybe your favorite team lost, or possibly your best friend isn't there today because she's sick. But that's not depression. Depression is 2 weeks. This might be caused by the death of a loved one or a divorce. A loved one being victimized, such as your best friend. And it's not just that, it's feeling trapped in a situation that is perceived as negative, or even living up to your expectations. Honestly, while people tell us that is a big deal and that is important, sometimes we just don't get it. I mean, I've heard kids joking about bipolar, but to be honest, things like bipolar and depression, they're not unserious things that you can just joke around with your friends. Bipolar is one of the things that causes depression and leads to suicides. And it's not just bipolar, it's other diseases. Even if you're not feeling that way right at that time, it's important to talk to people that you trust. Even if your friend decides to come along with it and you know this, you need to talk to somebody. Because you want to make sure that they live through this and that you can see them later on and teach them about your inside jokes in 50 years when you actually come across them at Walmart or someplace at that time. Another good thing is to go on websites such as suicide.org and talk to other people who feel similar ways. And another thing is to go to Suicide Line, and there's other ones out there. Look it up online, there's a ton of them. So, in the end, what started out on a presentation of why suicide rates have increased, started talking about depression and suicide and what leads to them, because it's a lot of things. But if you want to help, maybe go on and talk to people, be nice to people, say thank you when somebody opens up the door, please, and even complimenting somebody. It's all the little things that we can do that can help decrease suicide and depression rates, and that wouldn't be a bad thing, because we want more people to live on this earth and not die, at least not from themselves.